Imagine this. Your child is dying, and the people who should love him most, your own parents, refuse to spare a dime for his life-saving treatment. But then, they turn around and blow nearly $250,000 on your sister's wedding. That's my story. My dad stood in my apartment doorway, arms crossed, his face a hard mask. We don't have that kind of money lying around, Emily. You need to be realistic about this. My mom, always the silent accomplice, just nodded behind him, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. In the next room, my 7-year-old son, Ethan, was asleep, his breathing raspy, even with the constant hiss of the oxygen machine. On my kitchen table, medical bills were splayed out, a grim testament to my failures. $85,000. That's what the specialist quoted. It was for an experimental treatment, the only thing left that could save Ethan's life. His rare heart condition was advancing rapidly. Traditional treatments weren't working anymore. Time was running out. I'm Emily. I'm 31, a middle school science teacher in Columbus, Ohio, and I was raising Ethan alone. His father? He walked out when Ethan was diagnosed at 3. Couldn't handle having a sick kid, he said. That was 4 years ago, and I've been fighting this battle by myself ever since. My parents lived just 20 minutes away in their perfectly manicured suburban home. The same house where my younger sister, Claire, still had her childhood bedroom preserved like a shrine. Realistic? My voice cracked, raw with desperation. My son could die without this treatment. The doctor said he has maybe 6 months if we don't act now. My mom finally stepped forward, her hand gently touching my dad's arm. It was her usual move when she wanted to soften his words without actually challenging him. Honey, we understand this is difficult, she said, her voice strained. But we've already helped you so much over the years. We paid for 3 of his surgeries. We can't just empty our retirement accounts. I'm not asking you to empty them. I pleaded, my voice rising. I'm asking for a loan. I'll pay you back every single penny. I'll get a second job. I'll do whatever it takes. My father just shook his head slowly. Emily, you're barely keeping your head above water as it is. How would you ever pay us back? Be sensible. There are payment plans, medical financing options. You should look into those. I'd already looked into them. I'd spent weeks, months, researching every possible avenue. Payment plans would take too long. Ethan didn't have years to wait. Medical financing companies wanted interest rates that would bury me for decades, and most wouldn't even approve me. I was already drowning in debt. I tried to explain all this, my voice softening, hoping to reach them. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of doubt in my mother's eyes, a hint that she might actually try to convince my father. But then he spoke again, his voice firm, final. We can't do it, Emily. I'm sorry, but we have to think about our own future, too. We're not getting any younger. They left soon after. I stood at the window, watching their car disappear down the street. The weight of their refusal settled over me, heavy and suffocating like a thick, cruel blanket. I walked into Ethan's room, the steady hiss of his oxygen machine filling the silence. I sat beside his bed, watching his small chest rise and fall unevenly. He looked so peaceful in sleep, utterly unaware that his own grandparents had just, in essence, sealed his fate. The bitter irony burned in my throat. The next day, I made frantic calls. Distant cousins, my mother's siblings, anyone who might offer a lifeline. Most offered their sympathy. Some sent small amounts, $50, $100. My Aunt Teresa, bless her heart, sent $500 with a note saying she wished it could be more. I appreciated every single penny, but it felt like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a thimble. I was trying to fill an ocean with a teaspoon. 2 agonizing weeks later, I walked in the door after a particularly brutal day at school, and there was Ethan struggling to breathe. His lips had a blue tinge. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through me. I called the ambulance. They rushed him to the hospital, and the doctors stabilized him, but the cardiologist, Dr. Morrison, pulled me aside. His face was grim. His condition is deteriorating faster than we anticipated, Emily, he said softly. Without that treatment we discussed, I'd say he is 3 months at most. Maybe less. 3 months. My baby had 3 months unless I could find $85,000. I nodded numbly, a lump in my throat so huge I couldn't speak. That night, I launched a crowdfunding campaign. I poured my heart out, writing every detail, sharing photos of Ethan's bright, infectious smile from before he got so sick. Friends shared it, teachers from my school donated, even some parents of my students contributed what they could. But after 2 weeks, I'd only raised $12,000. It wasn't even close. Not even a dent. Then, the phone rang. It was Claire. My sister's voice was breathless with excitement, bubbling over. "Emily, I have the most amazing news. Jeffrey proposed. We're getting married." I tried to conjure up some enthusiasm, but the words felt heavy, hollow in my chest. "That's wonderful, Claire. Congratulations." "I know, right?" she gushed. "And Mom and Dad are being so incredibly generous. They're paying for the whole wedding. Can you believe it? They said we can have whatever we want. No budget limits. Jeffrey and I are thinking a destination wedding, maybe Italy or the south of France." "Oh, Emily, it's going to be absolutely perfect." My hand clenched around the phone. "No budget limits?" "None," she chirped. "Dad said this is his little girl's special day, and nothing is too good. We're meeting with wedding planners next week. The wedding won't be for another year, but we want to start planning now to make sure we get exactly what we want." I stood there in my tiny apartment, medical bills stacked on every surface, my son fighting for every breath in the next room. And I listened to my sister gush about her unlimited wedding budget. Something cold, hard, and utterly unforgiving started to form in my chest. A seed of understanding. A horrifying truth that would take root and grow in the coming months. The months that followed were a blur. A haze of hospital visits, doctors' grim faces, and mounting despair. I maxed out every credit card, took out personal loans at predatory interest rates. I sold everything I owned that had any value. My grandmother's ring, the one tangible link I had to my own mother, went to a pawn shop for a measly $800. My car was downgraded to a 15-year-old sedan that barely ran. I even moved from my small one-bedroom apartment to a cramped studio just to save on rent. And through it all, every family dinner, every phone call, every interaction somehow circled back to the wedding. My parents were utterly consumed. They went to tastings at five-star restaurants, toured Tuscan venues via video call, discussing floral arrangements that cost more than my monthly salary. I tried to be happy for Claire. I really did. She was my little sister, and once we had been close. But that closeness had withered over the years, replaced by a stark realization. My parents saw us very differently. Claire was the golden child, the one who did everything right. Graduated with honors, prestigious job, dated the right men. I was the one who got pregnant at 23 by a worthless man, who chose teaching over a lucrative career, who couldn't even keep her son healthy. One evening in July, my mother called. "Emily, honey, we need to talk about the wedding." "What about it?" I was exhausted, having just finished a summer school session and had spent 3 grueling hours at the hospital with Ethan. "Well, Claire wants you to be a bridesmaid, of course. But the dresses are going to be about $300, and we need you to order yours soon. $300. I did the math in my head. That was almost 2 weeks of Ethan's life-sustaining medications. "I don't know if I can afford that right now," I said softly. There was a beat of silence on the other end. "Emily, this is your sister's wedding." My mother's voice took on an immediate edge. "I know things are really tight. Ethan's medical expenses." She cut me off. "You're always talking about Ethan's medical expenses. I understand he's sick, but life goes on for the rest of us. This is Claire's special day." I closed my eyes, a wave of nausea washing over me. "Can I think about it? The deadline for ordering is next week. Claire has her heart set on having you in the wedding party." After we hung up, I sat in the oppressive dark of my studio apartment and just cried. How had it come to this? How had my own family become so utterly blind to the tragedy unfolding before them? My son was dying, and they were worried about bridesmaid dresses and seating charts. You might be wondering how I kept it together. Believe me, some days I barely did. By the way, if you're finding this story unbelievable, make sure to hit that subscribe button. There are more shocking twists ahead. Ethan's condition continued its agonizing decline. The experimental treatment was no longer an option. We'd missed the window. The doctors shifted to palliative care, focusing only on keeping him comfortable. Every day, I watched my son fade a little more, his bright spirit dimming along with his physical strength. He stopped asking when he could go back to school. He stopped talking about wanting to be a scientist when he grew up. He knew, in the way children somehow just know, he understood he was running out of time. I took a leave of absence from teaching to be with him. My principal was incredibly understanding, but it was unpaid. My already catastrophic financial situation became even more dire. I applied for every assistance program, every grant, every charity I could find. Most had waiting lists months long, or criteria I simply didn't meet. In September, 5 months after my parents' cold refusal, Claire's bachelorette party happened. My mother called, gushing about it. They'd rented a villa in Napa Valley, spa treatments, a private chef. It was absolutely magical. Emily, Claire was so happy. You should have seen her face. How much did it cost? I asked, unable to stop the words. Oh, I don't know exactly. Your father handled all that. Maybe $10,000, but it was worth every penny to see Claire so joyful. $10,000. More than a tenth of what could have saved Ethan, spent on a single weekend. Something inside me cracked. A fragile foundation of familial loyalty I'd been desperately clinging to finally shattered. That sounds wonderful, I said, my voice flat, empty. You know, Emily, my mother continued, oblivious. I wish you'd try to be more excited about this wedding. Claire feels like you're not really supporting her. I laughed then, a harsh, ragged sound that even startled me. Claire feels I'm not supporting her? She does. She's noticed you've been distant, and you still haven't confirmed whether you'll be a bridesmaid. I can't afford the dress, Mom. I told you that. Well, she sighed, exasperated. Maybe if you manage your money better, you wouldn't always be in this position. The words hung in the air like poison. Manage my money better, as if I'd been spending frivolously instead of fighting for my child's life. As if the crushing weight of medical debt was some kind of personal failing, rather than the brutal reality of a broken healthcare system and a family that chose fancy parties over their grandson's survival. I have to go, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Ethan needs me. Of course he does, my mother replied, and I heard the unspoken judgment in her tone. You know, Emily, maybe if you weren't so focused on Ethan's problems all the time, you'd be able to enjoy life more. Claire manages to balance everything so well. I hung up without another word. There was nothing left to say. October brought a cruel, biting cold snap that seemed to settle deep into my bones. Ethan was in and out of the hospital, his small body valiantly fighting a battle it was destined to lose. The doctor spoke in hushed tones, words like weeks, not months. I spent every agonizing moment I could by his bedside, reading him his favorite books, inventing stories about what heaven might be like, holding his frail hand as he battled the pain. My parents would visit occasionally, usually en route to or from some wedding-related appointment. They'd stay for maybe 20 minutes, pat Ethan's hand awkwardly, and then leave with visible expressions of relief. It was excruciating to witness their discomfort around their dying grandson, to see how eager they were to escape back to the glittering, happier world of wedding preparations. Claire came once. She stood in the doorway of Ethan's hospital room, immaculate in designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She barely lasted 5 minutes before claiming she had to leave for a dress fitting. He's so thin, she whispered to me in the hallway, as if this was breaking news, as if I hadn't watched my son waste away day by painful day. Yes, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. It must be so hard for you, she offered, touching my arm in a gesture that felt performative, hollow. But you're so strong, Emily. You always have been strong. I'd heard that word countless times in the past year, usually from people relieved they didn't have to be. Strong enough to handle this alone. Strong enough not to need help. Strong enough to watch your child die while your family spent a fortune on a party. The wedding is in 3 weeks, Claire continued. I really hope you'll reconsider being a bridesmaid. It would mean so much to me, and it might be good for you. You know, a chance to celebrate something happy, to have a break from all this. A break. As if I could simply take a vacation from my son's impending death. As if I could put on a smile and an overpriced dress and pretend everything was fine while Ethan fought for every breath. "I'll think about it," I lied. It was easier than trying to explain the suffocating rage her words ignited. The wedding invitations had arrived at my apartment 2 months earlier. Heavy cardstock, elegant gold embossing. The invitation suite alone probably cost $50 per guest. I did the math automatically now, every dollar converting in my mind to medical treatments we couldn't afford. Those invitations could have bought a month of physical therapy. The venue deposit could have covered a year of medications. I learned later that the final cost of Claire's wedding was $230,000. $230,000. The number echoed in my head like a silent scream. They'd spent nearly 3 times what could have saved Ethan's life on a single day of celebration. The venue alone was $80,000, roughly what I begged for. The flowers? $15,000. Catering? $40,000. The dress? $12,000. I pieced these numbers together gradually, from overheard conversations and my mother's casual mentions. She had no idea what each figure did to me, how every dollar amount felt like a fresh knife wound. Or maybe she didn't know, and simply didn't care. 2 weeks before the wedding, Ethan had a particularly bad day. His heart was giving out. Monitors shrieked their warnings. Nurses rushed in. I stood by his bed, gripping his small hand, watching the medical team fight to stabilize him. They succeeded, but Dr. Morrison pulled me aside once they were done. "Emily, he doesn't have much time left. Days, maybe a week. I think you should consider calling family. Anyone who might want to say goodbye. I call my parents." My father answered, sounding distracted. "Emily, we're right in the middle of the rehearsal dinner preparations. Can this wait?" My voice was hollow. "Ethan is dying," I said. "The doctor says days at most." There was a long pause. Then, "Oh, Emily, I'm so sorry. Do you need us to come? Do I need them to come?" My son, their grandson, was dying, and he was asking if I needed them to come. "Yes," I said, my voice breaking. "I think Ethan would want to see you. Of course, we'll try to stop by tomorrow. We have the final venue walkthrough in the afternoon, but maybe in the morning." They came the next day, arriving at 10 a.m., Starbucks cups in hand. They stayed for 15 minutes. Ethan was barely conscious. His breathing labored, even with the oxygen turned to maximum. My mother cried a little, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue that probably cost more than Ethan's breakfast. My father stood stiffly by the door, checking his watch twice. "We have to go," he finally said. "The florist is expecting us at 11. "The florist?" I repeated numbly. "For the centerpieces," he explained, completely oblivious. "It's important we get this right. There's no time for mistakes this close to the wedding." He seemed utterly blind to the irony. Standing in a room where the ultimate mistake, choosing flowers over family, was about to claim its final victim. They left with promises to come back soon. Promises I knew they wouldn't keep. Claire never came to say goodbye to her nephew. She was too busy with last-minute wedding emergencies, like the string quartet's lead violinist falling ill and needing replacement. This, apparently, was a crisis worthy of multiple frantic phone calls. Ethan died on Tuesday morning, 3 days before Claire's wedding. He slipped away quietly in his sleep, his small hand still in mine. The nurse who pronounced him dead cried more than my parents would when I called to tell them. My mother's first words, after I told her Ethan was gone, "Oh no. Oh, Emily, no. What terrible timing. Terrible timing." Because the funeral would interfere with their social calendar. The grief was overwhelming, an absolute ocean, but beneath it, I felt something else growing. A cold, patient understanding. They made their choice. Now I will make mine. Ethan's funeral was scheduled for Friday, 2 days before Claire's Sunday wedding. I didn't ask my parents to change the wedding date. I didn't ask Claire to postpone. I knew what the answer would be, and I simply didn't have the energy to hear them explain why their party was more important than my son's burial. What I didn't expect was for them to ask me to change the funeral. My mother called Wednesday evening. "Emily, honey, we need to talk about the funeral arrangements." I was sitting in Ethan's room, surrounded by his things, his favorite dinosaur poster, his collection of rocks, the science kit I bought him last Christmas that he'd been too sick to use. "Well, Friday is really difficult for us," she began. We have the wedding rehearsal that afternoon and the rehearsal dinner in the evening. It's all scheduled, deposits paid. Could you possibly move the funeral to Thursday, or maybe next week? I stared at the wall, unable to process what I was hearing. You want me to change my son's funeral because it conflicts with a wedding rehearsal? It's not just the rehearsal, Emily. It's the whole schedule. We have out-of-town guests arriving. Jeffrey's family flying in from Atlanta. Your father is giving a toast at the dinner. We can't miss it. Ethan is your grandson, and we'll be there to honor him. Of course we will, but Thursday would work so much better for everyone. The funeral home should be able to accommodate the change. Everyone, my voice came out flat, emotionless. I was beyond anger now, beyond hurt. I'd entered some new, chilling territory where feeling anything seemed impossible. Everyone would be more convenient if we buried my 8-year-old son a day early, so you don't miss cocktail hour. Don't be dramatic, Emily. You're making this sound worse than it is. We're trying to support this wedding. It's your sister. I hung up. I didn't trust myself to say another word. The funeral stayed scheduled for Friday. I arranged it myself, paid for it with money I borrowed from my principal, who had been more supportive in the past year than my own parents. It was a small service, just 20 people. My Aunt Teresa, some teachers from school, a few parents of Ethan's former classmates. My parents arrived 45 minutes late, dressed in clothes clearly chosen for the wedding festivities to follow. They stayed for the service, but left immediately after, skipping the small reception I'd organized at my apartment. We really have to go, my mother said, kissing my cheek with lips that barely made contact. Claire is having a crisis about the seating arrangements, but it was a lovely service, Emily. Very tasteful. Tasteful. My son's funeral was tasteful. I watched them leave, watched them drive away to their important appointments and critical emergencies. And I felt something inside me turn to stone. The grief was still there, crushing and absolute, but it was contained now, locked behind a wall of ice-cold clarity. Saturday passed in a fog of raw grief. I was alone in my apartment, surrounded by sympathy cards and the cold, hard reality of my medical bills. The crowdfunding campaign, which had scraped together $12,000, had been closed months ago, the money swallowed by treatments that only delayed the inevitable. I now owed $73,000 in medical debt, had maxed out credit cards to the tune of another $25,000, and my rent was 2 months overdue. Ethan's death hadn't ended my financial nightmare. It had just made it utterly, painfully pointless. My phone buzzed with messages from distant relatives and well-meaning friends asking if I was okay, if I needed anything. I didn't respond. What I needed was impossible. I needed my son back. I needed my parents to have been different people. I needed to wake up and discover the past year had all been a terrible nightmare. Sunday morning, Claire's wedding day. I woke at dawn. I hadn't wanted to think about it, hadn't wanted to acknowledge it was even happening, but my phone lit up with a text from my mother. Wish you were here to share this special day. Claire looks absolutely stunning. I stared at that message for a long, cold moment. Wish you were here. As if I'd simply chosen not to attend, as if I was missing it because of scheduling conflict, rather than because I'd buried my son 2 days earlier. I got dressed and went for a walk. Columbus was beautiful in late October, leaves turning golden and red. Ethan had loved autumn. We'd planned to go to the pumpkin patch this year. One more thing that would never happen. My phone continued buzzing throughout the day. Photos from the wedding. My mother had added me to some kind of group chat with extended family. I watched the images load, one by one. The breathtaking venue in Tuscany, bathed in golden hour light. Claire in her designer gown, a dress that cost more than most people's cars. The floral arrangements, elaborate and excessive. The 5-tier cake. The champagne tower. A string quartet playing on a terrace overlooking Vineyard Hills. $230,000 of celebration, of sheer, unadulterated joy, while my son's body lay in a cemetery where I couldn't even afford a proper headstone yet. I scrolled through the photos with a strange, detached calm. Everyone looked so happy. My father, beaming with pride in his tuxedo. My mother, elegant in her mother-of-the-bride dress that probably cost $3,000. Claire and her new husband, faces glowing with joy and possibility. Even the extended family members I'd called, practically begging for help, were now dressed in their finest, celebrating with champagne that cost more per bottle than they'd donated to Ethan's treatment fund. One photo showed my parents dancing, my mother's head thrown back in laughter. The caption beneath it read, "Best day ever. So blessed." I set my phone down and walked to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. I'd lost 15 pounds in the past month. My eyes were sunken, circled with dark shadows. I looked like I'd aged 10 years. I looked like someone who'd watched their child die while their family partied. That night, alone in my studio apartment, I made myself a promise. This wasn't over. They thought they could discard Ethan's life, discard me, and simply move on to their happy celebrations without consequence. They believed their money, their social standing, and their self-centered priorities could insulate them from accountability. They were wrong. I didn't know how yet, but I would make them understand what they'd done. I would make them feel a fraction of what I'd felt. Not revenge, exactly. Justice. A reckoning. I pulled out a notebook and started writing down everything. Every conversation, every refusal, every dollar amount. I meticulously documented the timeline. When I'd asked for help, when they'd refused, when Claire's wedding planning began, when Ethan died. I noted who had been at the funeral and who hadn't. I recorded every single wedding expense my mother had so casually mentioned. I wasn't sure what I'd do with this information, but I knew I needed it. Evidence. Proof. A cold, hard record of everything that had been taken from Ethan and from me. My phone buzzed again. Another text from my mother. Home from Italy. Exhausted but so happy. Claire and Jeffrey's first dance was magical. I'll send you the video. I typed back. Glad you had a good time. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, we'll come by next week to check on you. I'm sure you're feeling better by now. Feeling better. As if grief worked on a schedule. As if 1 week after your child's death, you were expected to be recovered and ready to hear about how magical someone else's party was. I didn't respond. The weeks after the wedding passed in a gray, suffocating haze. I returned to work, moving through my days like a ghost. My students were kind, softer with me than they'd ever been. The administration had granted me extended bereavement leave, but I declined. I needed the structure, needed something to fill the hours that used to be consumed by doctor appointments, medication schedules, and desperate, dwindling hope. My parents called occasionally, brief check-ins that felt more like obligations than genuine concern. "How are you holding up?" they'd ask, then fill the silence with updates about Claire's honeymoon, remodeling projects they were planning, holiday plans. They never mentioned Ethan. It was as if he'd never existed, as if acknowledging his absence might somehow spoil their carefully curated good mood. Claire sent a single text. "I'm sorry about everything. I hope we can move past this." Move past this? Move past watching my son die? Move past being abandoned by my family? Move past the fact that she'd had a $250,000 wedding while my child suffocated to death because we couldn't afford treatment? I didn't respond to that either. In December, 2 months after Ethan's death, my parents invited me to Christmas dinner. I almost declined, but a strange, dark curiosity compelled me. I wanted to see them, to understand how they lived with what they'd done. Their house was decorated like something from a magazine spread. A 12-foot tree, professionally decorated, garlands and lights on every surface. The scent of expensive catering filled the air. Claire and Jeffrey were already there when I arrived, tanned and relaxed from their honeymoon in Bali. "Emily, honey." My mother hugged me, her perfume cloying and overwhelming. "I'm so glad you came. We've missed you." I stood stiffly in her embrace. "Thank you for inviting me." Dinner was an elaborate affair. Prime rib, lobster tails, sides I couldn't even name. Wine my father proudly announced cost $200 a bottle. Everyone talked and laughed, sharing stories from the wedding, from the honeymoon, from their seemingly perfect, comfortable lives. I sat quietly, pushing food around my plate. "Emily, you're so quiet," Claire said, her voice carrying that superficial concern that never quite reached her eyes. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. You know," she continued, "Jeffrey and I were thinking, maybe you should consider moving somewhere else. A fresh start might help you heal. Columbus has too many sad memories now." I looked at her, this woman who was my sister in name only. Where would I go? I don't know. Somewhere cheaper. Maybe. I know you're struggling financially. Jeffrey's company has an office in Kansas City. Cost of living is much lower there. We could help you find something. Help me move away. Remove the uncomfortable reminder of their choices. I'll think about it. I said another lie. My father cleared his throat. Emily, your mother and I have been discussing your situation. We think you need to consider bankruptcy. It's the responsible thing to do, given your debt. Bankruptcy for your medical bills. You'll never pay them off on a teacher's salary. Better to just wipe the slate clean and start over. Start over. As if Ethan was a mistake to be corrected, a financial error to be written off. We could help you find a good bankruptcy attorney, my mother added. Your father knows several. I set my fork down carefully. You know what would have helped? $85,000. 15 months ago. The table went silent. Claire looked at Jeffrey uncomfortably. My mother's smile froze in place. Emily, my father said, his voice carrying a clear warning. We've been over this. Have we? I countered, my voice dangerously calm, because I don't remember us ever really discussing it. You said no, and that was it. We made a difficult decision based on our financial situation, he insisted. Your financial situation? I gestured around the room, taking in the opulent decorations, the expensive food. This doesn't look like financial difficulty. The $230,000 wedding doesn't suggest financial difficulty. Claire's face flushed. That's not fair, isn't it? I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against their expensive hardwood floor. You spent almost 3 times what could have saved Ethan's life on a single day. A party, flowers and cake, a dress you'll wear once. Emily, that's enough. My father stood too, his face red, angry. We made the choice we thought was right. We're not going to apologize for supporting your sister's happiness. And Ethan's life? I pushed. What about supporting that? He was sick, my mother said, her voice shaking. The doctor said there was no guarantee the treatment would work. We weren't going to throw away money on something that might not even help. But you'd throw away twice that much on party favors and centerpieces that went in the trash the next day? Get out, my father roared. If you're going to be disrespectful, you can leave. I grabbed my coat. Don't worry, I'm going. You're just bitter because your life didn't turn out the way you wanted. Claire called after me. It's not our fault you made bad choices. I stopped at the door and turned back. They were all standing now, a unified front against me. My parents, my sister, her husband. All of them comfortable, secure, righteous in their positions. Bad choices. I repeated, my voice dripping with ice. Like trusting family? Like believing blood meant something? Like thinking you'd choose your grandson over a party? I walked out into the biting cold December night and got into my beat-up car. I sat there for a moment, watching through the window as they settled back down to their expensive dinner, probably already dismissing me as dramatic, unstable, ungrateful. That was the last time I spoke to any of them for 4 long years. Life, stubborn and relentless, continued. I declared bankruptcy, just as my father had suggested, wiping out most of my medical debt, but utterly destroying my credit for years to come. I moved to a cheaper apartment in a worse neighborhood. I took on tutoring jobs in the evenings and summers, just to make ends meet. I existed, but I didn't truly live. And I planned. I couldn't touch them yet. I was too powerless, too broken, too consumed with grief and mere survival. But I was patient. I watched from a distance, following their lives through social media accounts they didn't realize I could still see. I documented everything, adding it to my notebooks. I waited. Claire got pregnant a year after her wedding. My mother posted constant updates about the pregnancy, the baby shower, the nursery preparations. The baby, a girl named Sophia, arrived healthy and perfect. Photos showed my parents beaming, holding their first grandchild, as if Ethan had never existed, as if Sophia was their first and only. I saw one comment on my mother's Facebook post from a distant cousin. Your first grandchild? So exciting. My mother's response. Yes, we're over the moon. No correction. Not even an acknowledgement that another grandchild had existed. Had died. Had mattered. Ethan had been erased from their family narrative. I took a screenshot. Added it to my collection. 2 years after Ethan's death, I went back to school, taking online classes at night, working toward a master's degree in education administration. 3 years after that, I was promoted to assistant principal. The salary was good. I was slowly, deliberately building something. I also started saving money. Every extra dollar went into a separate account, one I never touched. I didn't know what I was saving for exactly, but I knew I'd need resources eventually. Power, I understood, required capital. During those years, my parents tried to reach out occasionally. Birthday cards with generic messages. Christmas gifts sent through the mail, usually gift cards to stores I didn't shop at. My father called once to tell me they'd set up a small college fund for Sophia and wondered if I wanted to contribute. I hung up on him. Claire sent a birth announcement when she had her second child, a boy named Jackson. The card featured a professional photo of their perfect family, expensive clothes, genuine smiles. On the back, someone had written, "Hope you're doing well," almost as an afterthought. I kept every card, every announcement, every casual dismissal. More evidence. For years after Ethan's death, I was the principal of a successful middle school, earning enough to live comfortably. Though I still kept my lifestyle modest, I'd rebuilt myself from nothing. I'd created a life that had purpose and meaning, even without the person who'd given it both. I'd also continued following my family's activities. Claire's husband, Jeffrey, had been promoted to vice president at his company. They bought a larger house in an exclusive neighborhood. My parents had taken up golf, joining an expensive country club. They traveled frequently, posting photos from idyllic beaches and charming European cities. Life was good for them, better than good. Then, in early spring, something changed. I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Important family matter." I almost deleted it as spam, but something made me open it. "Emily, this is your Aunt Teresa. I'm reaching out because I thought you should know that your father lost his job 3 months ago. He's been trying to keep it quiet, but the situation is serious. His entire retirement account was invested in his company's stock, which collapsed when the company went bankrupt. Your parents have lost almost everything. They're facing foreclosure on their house. I know you and they aren't close, but I thought you want to know. Your father is too proud to ask for help, but they need it. Please call me if you can. Love, Teresa." I read the email 3 times. Then I went to my computer and started searching. It didn't take long to find the news articles. The company my father had worked for, a regional manufacturing firm, had been caught in a massive fraud scandal. The CEO was facing federal charges. The company had declared bankruptcy, and thousands of employees had lost their jobs and their retirement savings. My father's name appeared in several articles as one of the senior executives who'd lost everything. I sat back and stared at the screen. After all these years, after building their comfortable life on the grave of my son's memory, they'd lost it all. Karma, some might call it. Justice, others would say. I didn't have a name for what I felt. It wasn't satisfaction, not exactly. It was more like recognition. The universe had shifted, and suddenly, I wasn't powerless anymore. My phone rang a week later. My mother's number. I stared at it, watching it ring, then go to voicemail. She called again the next day, and the day after that. I never answered. Then came a knock on my door one evening in May. I looked through the peephole and saw my father standing there. He looked older than I remembered. Grayer, thinner, diminished. I opened the door, but left the chain engaged. "Emily," his voice cracked on my name. "Please, we need to talk. Can I come in?" "No." He flinched. "I know things have been difficult between us. I know we've made mistakes. But we're family. We need help." "Help," I repeated, the word tasting strange, foreign in my mouth. "I lost my job. You probably heard. We're in serious financial trouble. The house is in foreclosure. Your mother's medical insurance ran out, and she has some health issues that need addressing. We're asking our daughters for help. Claire and Jeffrey are doing what they can, but they have their own family to support. We thought maybe you could contribute something, even a small amount. A loan, perhaps, that you could pay back when your situation improves." I stared at him through the narrow gap in the door. "When my situation improves? I know you're doing better now. I saw online that you're a principal. That must pay well. We wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate." "Desperate?" I said softly. "That's interesting. I remember being desperate once." His face colored. "Emily, please. This isn't the time to dredge up the past, is it? I smiled. It wasn't a kind expression. You're asking me for money because you're facing financial ruin. That sounds familiar. This is different. How? I asked. You're my parents, and Ethan was your grandson. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. How much do you need? I finally asked. Hope flared, pathetic and naked, in his eyes. We owe about $90,000 on the house. If we could come up with that amount, we could keep it. But anything would help. Even $20,000 or $30,000 would give us time to figure something out. $90,000. More than what could have saved Ethan. I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. I'll think about it, I said, and closed the door in his face. Behind the closed door, I leaned against the wall and smiled. Finally, after 4 years of waiting, of planning, of building myself back up from nothing, the opportunity I'd been waiting for had arrived. Now came the reckoning. I didn't contact my parents for 2 weeks. I let them wait, let them wonder, let them feel the agonizing anxiety of uncertainty. Every day that passed, their situation grew more dire. I knew this because I'd started checking the public foreclosure listings. Their house, the house I'd grown up in, was scheduled for auction in 45 days. During those 2 weeks, my mother called 17 times. My father called 9. Claire sent 3 lengthy text messages explaining how her parents had always done their best, how they were good people who'd made some mistakes, how family was supposed to forgive and help each other. The irony, it seemed, was completely lost on her. I responded to none of them. Instead, I did my research. I looked into their financial situation as thoroughly as I could from the outside. The house was worth about $320,000, and they owed $90,000. They had equity, but not enough to start over somewhere nice. They'd have to move to a modest apartment, maybe in a less desirable area. They'd have to learn to live on Social Security and whatever my father could scrape together from a new job, if anyone would hire a 63-year-old disgraced executive. It would be hard for them, humbling, a complete reversal of the comfortable life they'd built. But they'd survive. That was the crucial difference between their situation and what Ethan had faced. They weren't going to die. They were just going to be uncomfortable. On the 15th day, I finally called my father back. Emily, he sounded breathless, desperate. Thank God. I was so worried you wouldn't call. I've been thinking about your request. I could hear the hope in his voice, pathetic and naked. I want to meet all of you. You, Mom, and Claire. We need to have a conversation. Of course. Of course. When? Where? We can come to you, or we can meet somewhere neutral, whatever you prefer. My apartment. Saturday at 2 p.m. We'll be there. Thank you, Emily. You don't know what this means to us. I hung up without responding. Saturday arrived, cold and gray, appropriate weather for what I had planned. I'd spent the morning preparing, arranging chairs in my small living room, setting out a folder on the coffee table. I'd printed documents, organized them chronologically. Everything was ready. They arrived at exactly 2 p.m., all 3 of them. My father looked even worse than he had at my door, his suit hanging loose on a frame that had clearly lost weight. My mother seemed to have aged a decade, her hair grayer than I remembered, her face etched with worry. Claire looked uncomfortable, dressed too formally for my shabby apartment, clutching her designer purse like a shield. Emily, my mother said, moving as if to hug me. I stepped back. Sit down. They arranged themselves on my second-hand couch, sitting close together like children called before a principal, which I suppose they were. I remained standing. You asked me for $90,000, I began. We know it's a lot, my father interjected quickly, but we're prepared to offer collateral to sign a formal loan agreement. We'd pay you back with interest. How? I asked flatly. You have no income. Mom doesn't work. What would you use to pay me back? I'm looking for work. Something will come through. At 63, with your reputation attached to a fraud scandal, he flinched. That wasn't my fault. I had no idea what the CEO was doing. Ignorance isn't innocence, I countered. You were a senior executive. You should have known. I picked up the folder from the coffee table. But we're not here to discuss your career failures. We're here to discuss your request for money. Will you help us? My mother asked, her voice small, pleading. That depends, I said. I have some questions first. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. Do you remember this conversation? May 16th, 4 years ago. I came to you and asked for 85 000TOPAYFORETHASTREATMENT MYMOTHERSFACEWENTPALE EMILYWEBENOVERTHIS HAVEWE IINTERUPTED MYVOICESHARP BECAUSEIDON TTHINKWEHAVE NOTREALLY NOTHONESTLY IHELDUPTHEDOCUMENT APRINTOUTOFMYORIGINALCROWDWDFUNDINGPAGE WITHTHEATREATNTCOSTCLEARLYLISTD 85 000 Tope Freethan treatment. My mother's face went pale. Emily, we've been over this, have you? I interrupted, my voice sharp. Because I didn't think we'll wave. Not really, not honestly. I held up the document. Aprintat off my original crowdfunding page, with the treatment cost clearly listed. 85,000. You told me you couldn't afford it. That you had to think about your own retirement. That I needed to be realistic. We made the best decision we could at the time, my father said stiffly. Did you? I pulled out another paper. This is a receipt from Claire's wedding planner. Total cost of services, $230,000. Paid in full by you. 18 months after you told me you couldn't afford $85,000 to save your grandson's life. Claire stood up abruptly. This isn't fair. You're twisting everything. Sit down, I said, my voice hard enough that she instantly obeyed. I'm not finished. I pulled out more documents, laying them on the coffee table one by one. Wedding venue, $80,000. Flowers, $15,000. Catering, $40,000. The dress, $12,000. Photographer, $8,000. Band, $10,000. Should I continue? What do you want from us? My father demanded, his face reddening. An apology? Fine. We're sorry. We made a mistake. Is that what you want to hear? A mistake. I repeated softly, the word a bitter taste on my tongue. You think choosing a party over your grandson's life was a mistake? We didn't know he was going to die, my mother whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Yes, you did. The doctors told you. I told you. You knew. And you didn't care enough to help. I pulled out one last document, the one that hurt most to look at, a photo of Ethan in his hospital bed, taken 2 weeks before he died. This is what $85,000 would have saved. This child, your grandson. Remember him? My mother started sobbing. Claire looked away, unable to meet my gaze. My father stared at the photo, his expression unreadable. Emily, please, my mother pleaded through her tears. We know we failed you. We know we should have done more. But we can't change the past. We can only ask for your mercy now. Mercy, I said, placing the photo back in the folder carefully. That's interesting. I don't remember receiving much mercy when I begged you for help. When I sold everything I owned. When I maxed out every credit card. When I moved to a studio apartment and ate ramen so I could afford Ethan's medications. We didn't understand how bad it was, my father insisted. Didn't you? I told you multiple times. I showed you the medical bills. I explained that without treatment, he would die. What part of that was unclear? Silence. But you understood perfectly well how important Claire's wedding was. You understood that the centerpieces needed to be exactly right. That the venue had to be perfect. That your daughter deserved the best money could buy. I sat down across from him, my voice calm, measured. Here's what I've learned in the past 4 years. You didn't help Ethan because you didn't want to. It wasn't about the money. You had the money. You proved that. It was about choice. You chose what mattered to you. That's not true. Claire protested. They were trying to protect their retirement. Were they? I challenged. Because they spent almost 3 times their retirement concerns on your wedding. Math doesn't lie, Claire. Priorities don't lie. My father leaned forward, his voice strained. Emily, I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But are you really going to punish us now, when we need you most? Are you going to be as cruel as you think we were? Cruel? I tasted the word. Is it cruel to make choices based on what matters to you? Is it cruel to decide that your resources should go toward your own priorities rather than someone else's crisis? Because that's what you taught me. That's the lesson you gave me when Ethan was dying. So, you won't help us, my mother said flatly, hopelessness etched on her face. I didn't say that. I picked up the folder and pulled out a check I'd prepared. I laid it on a coffee table. I'm willing to give you $90,000. Hope bloomed on their faces, desperate and immediate. However, I continued, there are conditions. Anything, my father said quickly. We'll sign whatever you want. Payment plans, interest, collateral. It's not about payment. I set the check on the table between us. It was made out for $90,000, dated for today. The first condition is that you acknowledge, here and now, that you chose Claire's wedding over Ethan's life. That you had the money, and you refused to help. I want to hear you say it. They stared at me. Claire looked at her parents. You don't have to do this, she whispered. She's trying to humiliate you. Yes, I agreed. I am. Just like you humiliated me when I begged for help. When I stood in your doorway with medical bills, and you told me to be realistic. When I buried my son alone because you had a rehearsal dinner. So yes, I want you to say it out loud that you made a choice, and Ethan died because of it. My mother was crying harder now. My father's face was beet red, but they needed that check. They needed it desperately. We chose the wedding, my father finally said, his voice barely audible, raw with shame. We had the money, and we chose to spend it on Claire's wedding instead of Ethan's treatment. And I prompted, he died because we didn't help. Mom, I looked at my mother. We should have helped you, she whispered, her voice broken. We should have saved him. We were wrong. I turned to Claire. And you? What's your role in this? I didn't know, she said quickly, defensively. I didn't know they'd refuse to help Ethan. Didn't you? I asked, my gaze unwavering. You never wondered where the money for your elaborate wedding came from? You never thought it was odd that I asked you to move your bachelorette party because Ethan was in the hospital and you refused? You never questioned having your wedding 3 days after your nephew's funeral. She had no answer. Here's the second condition, I continued. You take this money, you save your house, and you never contact me again. No birthday cards, no Christmas gifts, no phone calls. You remove me from your lives completely, the way you removed Ethan from your memories. You go back to pretending I don't exist. Emily, you can't mean that. My mother cried. We're family. No, I corrected her. We share DNA. Family is something else. Family shows up. Family sacrifices. Family doesn't let children die while they plan parties. I stood up and walked to my door, opening it wide. Those are my conditions. Take the check or leave it. You have 60 seconds to decide. They looked at each other, a silent conversation playing out in their glances and expressions. I watched them calculate. Watched them weigh their pride against their utter desperation. It took them 43 seconds. My father picked up the check. We accept your conditions, he said, his voice hollow. Good. There's a document on the table next to the check. It's a formal agreement that you'll have no further contact with me. Sign it. They signed without reading it, which told me everything I needed to know about how desperate they truly were. My father's signature was shaky. My mother could barely hold the pen through her tears. Claire signed with angry, sharp strokes, her face red with suppressed rage. When they finished, I collected the document and handed them the check. You can go now. Emily, my father started, but I cut him off. You agreed to the conditions. No contact means no contact. Leave. They filed out silently. My mother crying. My father's shoulders slumped. Claire walking stiffly beside them. I closed the door behind them and locked it. Then I walked to my bedroom and opened my laptop. I pulled up my bank account and looked at the balance. The $90,000 I'd just given them had been transferred from my savings this morning. Now showed $12,000 remaining. Years of careful saving, of living modestly, of putting aside every extra penny, reduced to almost nothing. But I wasn't done. I opened my email and composed a message to my Aunt Teresa, the only family member who'd shown any real concern for me over the years. I attached a document, a letter I'd written months ago, waiting for the right time to send it. Aunt Teresa, I wanted you to know what really happened with Ethan. I've attached a complete timeline of events, including all the requests I made for help and the responses I received. I've also included documentation of the expenses my parents incurred during that same period, particularly regarding Claire's wedding. I thought the family should know the truth. Please share this with anyone you think should see it. Love, Emily. I hit send. The document I'd attached was comprehensive. Every conversation, every refusal, every wedding expense, every hospital bill, the photo of Ethan in his hospital bed, screenshots of my mother's Facebook post calling Sophia her first grandchild, the timeline showing how my parents attended Claire's rehearsal dinner instead of Ethan's funeral reception. Everything laid out in chronological, undeniable detail. My Aunt Teresa had a large extended family network. She was the type who forwarded emails to dozens of people who shared everything on social media. By tomorrow, everyone would know. My parents' friends, their country club, their church, their neighbors. The truth would spread like wildfire. The check I'd given them would clear. They'd keep their house, yes, but they'd lose something far more valuable. Their reputation, their comfortable social standing, the image they'd carefully crafted of being generous, loving parents and grandparents. Everyone would know what they'd really chosen, what they'd really valued. A knock came at my door an hour later. I looked through the peephole and saw Claire standing there alone, her face twisted in a furious mask. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. You signed an agreement not to contact me. That email you sent. You can't do that. You're ruining their lives. I'm telling the truth, I said calmly. There's a difference. You're vindictive and cruel. You're destroying them out of spite. No, I said, my voice flat. I'm giving them exactly what they gave me. Consequences. Actions have consequences, Claire. They made choices, and now they get to live with them. Just like I've had to live with watching my son die. They gave you $90,000, she hissed. They gave me back a fraction of what they stole from Ethan, from me, and they only did it because they had no other choice. If they weren't desperate, would they have helped? We both know the answer. You're never going to let this go, are you? You're going to hate us forever. I don't hate you, I said, and the realization was startlingly true. Hate requires caring. I don't care about any of you anymore. You stopped being my family the day you chose a party over my son's life. Now you're just strangers who happen to share my last name. Mom is devastated. Dad looks broken. Was that worth it? Ask Ethan if it was worth it. I countered, my voice cracking slightly. Oh wait, you can't. Because he's dead. Claire's face crumpled. You really are as heartless as they said. Heartless, I repeated. My heart broke 4 years ago, and you weren't there to see it. You were too busy planning your perfect wedding and your perfect life, so don't talk to me about heartless, Claire. You don't get to use that word. She turned and walked away, and I closed the door for the last time on my biological family. Over the next few months, I heard through indirect channels what happened to them. My parents were indeed socially ostracized. Friends stopped calling. Their country club membership was quietly not renewed. Church attendance became so awkward that they eventually stopped going altogether. They kept their house, yes, but it became a gilded cage, a prison of sorts, a place where they lived with the full, suffocating weight of their choices. My father eventually found work as a consultant, making a fraction of his former salary. My mother developed severe anxiety issues and started therapy. Claire and Jeffrey, seeking distance from the scandal that had tainted their perfect life, moved to another state. Their elaborate Christmas cards, once a yearly tradition, stopped coming altogether. I even heard my mother told people I was dead, that it was easier than explaining why her daughter wanted nothing to do with her. And in a way, I suppose she was right. That version of me, the daughter who'd been grateful for scraps, who'd accepted being second best, who'd swallowed her pain to keep the peace, that person didn't exist anymore. As for me, I continued building my life. I dated eventually, cautiously. I made real friends, the kind who showed up when things were hard, who truly listened. I traveled to places Ethan would have loved, scattering his ashes in beautiful locations around the world. I live for both of us. The $90,000 I'd given my parents was worth it, not because they deserved help, not because I felt a resurgence of familial love, but because it gave me something far more precious: closure. I had proven I was the better person, the one who showed mercy even when none had been shown to me. And then I'd walked away, leaving them to live with the indelible weight of their choices. Some might call it cruel. They might say that real forgiveness means letting go completely, helping without conditions. But those people never watched their child die alone while their family celebrated elsewhere. They never had to choose between electricity and medicine. They never had to bury their baby with borrowed money, knowing $250,000 had been spent on cake and flowers. I gave my parents exactly what they asked for on my terms. I had lived up to my obligation as their daughter one final time. And then I had closed that door forever, just as they had closed the door on Ethan when he needed them most. In the end, this wasn't about cruelty. It was about justice, about balance, about ensuring that consequences finally met actions. They taught me that family was conditional, that love had limits, that some lives mattered more than others. I simply returned their lessons, wrapped in a check they couldn't refuse and a truth they couldn't escape. And I moved forward into a future they'd never be a part of, carrying Ethan's memory with me, finally at peace. This is my story. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Or have you ever faced a similar betrayal? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to hear from you.